Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and Little Rock Public Radio.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks very much for joining us. It is a crucial component of the Arkansas economy, agriculture, an enterprise with annual revenues in the billions of dollars. And with the autumn harvest fast approaching, that enterprise is troubled. Not just in Arkansas, but especially Arkansas, given its significance to the state's overall fiscal health. Well, we'll go to that story in just a few moments. First, the sea change in collegiate athletics. NIL, name, image, likeness, transfer portals. Concepts and structures unheard of to earlier generations of college athletes, coaches, and supporters. And with the season opener only days distant, what's the impact on college sports in Arkansas? Some play-by-play now, if you will, from Beau Wilcox, who writes sports when he's not writing legal briefs, and David Bazzel, a.k.a. the Baz, who put on a hog uniform a few years back and never took it off. Gentlemen, thanks very much for coming in. Whoever's that, Beau, we'll start with you. We're entering year 2 of this brave new world. What did year 1 teach us?
That losing is hard. As I was talking to you earlier about the fact that, 2023-24 for the Razorback football, basketball, baseball, softball, flagship programs, if you will, was tough. And I think it was very evident that sometimes this whole concept of money coming in doesn't necessarily buy you better results. But I think that with the sea change you talked about, Steve, there's come a lot of progress in this state, obviously, in recent months because we've seen changes in the way and the nature of funding for some of these big programs.
Yeah.
And so, it is a different time. Year 2, I would assess is, I don't know if I would compare it to year 1 much because, again, all of this came on very suddenly. You were talking about those being concepts unfamiliar to prior generations. They were unfamiliar to us until literally, a few years ago. So I think we're adapting as a state. We're adapting as a program, if you will. And I say we because I'm a shameless hog fan,
Yeah.
But I'm very encouraged. Like I said earlier, I think that you have to go through maybe some rough patches, and this has been one, but it feels like there's a lot more stability now than there was just a year ago.
Yeah. Dave?
Yeah, it's a mess. I hate it. I can't stand it, and I'm glad the players are getting some money. But the problem, we saw this coming. Just open the door and let's go without any rules, without any regulations, without any controls, and then you have a certified mess that everybody's trying to struggle to get a hold of. And I knew this would probably happen, and I saw it happening, Steve. You go back. I started the Broyles Award back in 1996, and assistant coaches that we would bring in to honor were making about $150,000 a year. We were paying them to win and giving them golf clubs, and because they weren't getting paid as much. And then what changed everything? It's real simple. TV. TV money changed everything. If you look at the increase in TV revenues, it became so big that all of a sudden you're not having to pay players. So who do you pay? You keep paying your coaches. You keep adding more staff. You keep adding bigger facilities to the point to where I was watching now, the assistant coaches are getting paid $3 million a year. Head coaches are getting paid $10 million. And it just kept going up. So I remember thinking, this has got to stop somehow. They just felt like we got it made. And the NCAA always had a model that this was amateurism. And finally, people in Congress said, hey, enough's enough. You guys, these guys need to be making money. But instead of the college giving up that money, they just said, you go get it yourself through NIL. And that model hasn't turned out to be what they thought it would be. And so now you've just got a free-for-all of trying to figure out how to manage, how to get more money, how to pay the players, how to pay your bills. And I think, listen, everybody in the college game is struggling to deal with this.
Well, yeah, Beau said just a second ago that money athletic money doesn't necessarily buy you success. You can't even take the field without more money. You can't get on the court. You can't get on the diamond without more money. And if year 1 taught us anything, it was acknowledged at the trustees meeting the other day, the Fayetteville trustees meeting the other day. it's going to cost more. It's expensive now, and it's going to cost more.
Absolutely. And I think that, as you and I had discussed before we came on camera, the nature of this beast is that it really is a beast now. It's so much bigger than any of us could have thought about. Athletic departments at the magnitude of the University of Arkansas and other programs, they're just massive. And, having to have all the staffing, administration, facilities, everything is a challenge now, and it is an arms race. And so those with the arms, prevail, and so you got to buy it. And so this will be an interesting period too. I think year 3, you'll have to look at things a little differently, because it's a little bit like watching a player develop from a freshman to a senior, or used to be that they would stick around that long. But you would see those early struggles, and then you would see them come into their own, as they got to be upperclassmen. And that's kind of the same, analogy here is, let's see how the university, the foundation, the benefactors all line up with this, because I think this will be a critical year. Yes, you want to have the wins and you want to have success as a program, but I think it's just as critical to show and demonstrate, especially in a league like the SEC, and especially now that it's expanded, you have to pay money to make money. And I think that in this state, we finally are coming around to this idea of, we have a lot of very wealthy people and entities in this state that can help this program get to a different level. Yeah. And so year 3, I do think will be interesting.
Yeah, David Bazzel, go ahead.
I just think what's going to happen, Beau, too, you're going to have donor fatigue. I sat next to a guy yesterday who basically is helping to pay for a particular player at a particular college, because that's what coaches are having to ask now. They're having to ask their donors, hey, I need this receiver. Can you give me $500,000? And I will tell you, that will last for a little while. But after a few years of doing that, there will be a fatigue set in. But beyond the foundation asking for money to give, or to the university, I just think at some point what's going to happen is they're going to have to become employees of the university. I don't think there's any other way for a control standpoint. Lane Kiffin is the best guy to measure this. He coached in the NFL. He's coaching for Ole Miss. He said, this system does not work. He said, in the NFL, we have controls, we have rules. There are none here, and it will not sustain this kind of growth without some type of control.
Yeah. In this new paradigm, anyway, in collegiate athletics, does the word amateur even fit anymore? Does the word student athlete?
No, nobody cares. No, they don't. They don't care. And you're right. That's why are we even doing this? This is really about professional. What we're seeing on Saturday is turning into a professional business or a professional sport. There's no amateur. Do you hear anybody talking about grades or school anymore? No. And you're moving from school to school. Some players are in 4 different schools in 4 years, and just the world we live in now.
Well, and the NCAA's teeth have been taken away, and so that leads to this lawless atmosphere.
There's no leadership.
That
right.
And so I do think that once because there's always these, we all have these tales of things we've heard and you've experienced as a player, of things that happened about, the NCAA coming in and just henpecking programs. And there was a Mississippi State quarterback years ago that got suspended for a game because of boost. He had a flat or a blowout on the interstate, and he called a booster, and the booster, sent him $100 for a tire, and they suspended him. That would never happen again. In fact, probably there's somebody out there that's going to have a tire company as a result of their performance on the field. And so it's a completely different atmosphere. And as David said, that fatigue factor will set in. That's going to be, again, something we'll see down the road. But I also think there hopefully will be some level of regulation by then that might ebb that fatigue somewhat.
The counter argument on that, gentleman, though, is that it is the players. I mean, we're talking about billion-dollar enterprises here, but it was the players out on the field or on the court risking injury, risking brain damage, whatever, and it was their talent. They're taking the risk, and they're getting, free tuition, but it stops there. is there not an argument for equity to be made in the sharing the revenue with the players?
Listen, I was one of those ones that...
Now, there goes the amateur.
That's
course,
right.
But
well, I was excited to have a college scholarship and to be able to get my education paid for now. But again, what changed everything is, as you mentioned, the billions that are being generated through television. And so what do you do with all that money? I think if you could go back in time, which some coaches Steve Spurrier talked about, hey, man, let's do a pool of $2 or $3 million and let's give every player $30,000, $50,000 a year. But we're past that now. And so we've got guys that are getting paid $1 million, $2 million a year. And so I don't think you can ever go back. Now, once a school, if they were to hire them as employees, Steve, you might get back to that model where you say, we're going to pay every offensive lineman $100,000 or $200,000. But the amateurism is done. And whose fault is that? The NCAA probably thought they could hold on to amateurism, and they couldn't.
Beau.
I'll echo what David said there, especially that last point about, the amateurism and how it's a lost concept, of course. But, I think your counter argument is a good one. I mean, they are the players. They deserve, I think, to be compensated. I don't think anybody is still of the, old school mentality where they're not, they just say, no, don't pay them, I don't think that attitude is prevalent anymore, but the reality is that there's not a model, there's not a playbook literally for how to do this, and so everything is an on-the-fly experience, and it's all trial and error. And so, I think the work so far has been good. There's been measured progress there that hopefully can be sustained, but it's just an interesting time in so many ways, and I can't imagine being a student athlete at this point.
Our conversation thus far has centered around the Fayetteville program, the Razorback program. What is the impact of this new paradigm and the added expense in college athletics? What impact is this going to have on smaller institutions? The Bears, the Bisons, the Mule Riders, the Red Wolves.
I think you see a little bit of the trickle down now. I've heard in Division II where you have a little bit of where some of those Division II players would like to have some of that NIL, and those small, for example, you take a school like Arkansas Tech and Russellville. There are businesses in there that now that they can pay players, I'm sure, are doing endorsement deals with them, and it's not on the level of what you may see like in the SEC, but it has trickled down there. And then that's the last amateurism area in sports, are the Division III, the NAIA level, where they don't have the money. They're playing for the love of the game. They're playing for the chance to go to school. I don't think it will affect them. They can't afford that. I think it's those middle of the range where even the non-Power 5, for example, the non-Power 5 like say like an Arkansas State or a Charlotte or whatever, that's where the really tough ones, because they cannot compete with the big boys. So what do? How do they put on a program? And it's almost, you're going to have a super conference with probably 60 schools that have all this money, and the rest are going to just try to do the best they can.
Whither academics in this new arena, this new paradigm? Are academics under stress? I mean, is it inevitable that academics will be devalued in this new system?
I mean, I think that culturally, education has, been scaled down a little bit, and that's fine. It's a transitional time, and we obviously have more people out there doing vocational programs and just going straight to work, and so college has maybe lost that luster to some, but it's still a proving ground, a training ground for these athletes. And so I don't think that, there's exceptions, obviously. There's the LeBron Jameses of the world that are just so talented that college they're going to bypass it or whatever. But, as David was talking about those second-tier programs kind of having to struggle, it's interesting because I don't feel like they are struggling in the sense that there's plenty of mid-majors, if you will, that are winning games and important games. And so I don't know if, we talk about parity a lot, and this feels more like haves and have-nots again, and that's what I think all of our concern would be is that gulf between those power programs and the non-power programs just going to widen. So I don't think anybody really wants that to happen. I like the idea of 120 or whatever the number is now in Division I programs, you're never going to have them all on a similar level, but yeah, give them all shots at competing with each other at times. I mean, let's see what NIL has done truthfully by having things like Arkansas play UAPB. Is that going to probably be a lopsided game this year? Sure. Is it probably going to be in future years? Absolutely. But you never know. And
Push for time, but I got to get this in.
Sure.
What kind of season? Now, you got an odd chemistry experiment up here, Pittman and Petrino.
Yeah. That was the best move he could make in the offseason. That gave the fan base hope. Not much hope after that. They're going to be better, Steve. The problem is the schedule that they play is really, really difficult. So how many more wins does better get you? I just don't know. They're probably going to be anywhere from as low as 5 wins to as high as 8. So somewhere in there, we're going to see the magic of Bobby Petrino and what he can do on the offensive side of the ball.
Beau Wilcox.
I have said for months now that Sam Pittman's job is obviously at stake here this season. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I've said for months that 6-6 and possibly a bowl win keeps him around. Generates enough enthusiasm going into the next year. Right now, the recruiting classes for 25 and 26 are looking strong, but we all know that'll change. But I think a 7-5 season is probably the ceiling. You win a bowl game, you go 8-5. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but
get a raise.
Well,
wow.
That's
We'll take it right
that's
now.
another subject that maybe throwing raises around isn't the thing to do yet. But I think 7-5 would be good. I'm going to say 6-6 with a bowl win in Memphis.
Beau and the Baz, you will be back here. Thanks for coming
Thanks,
in.
Steve. We appreciate it.
And we'll be right back. We are back, and now to the economics of agriculture in a year of unease. Inflation, interest rates, supply chain disruptions, crop prices that aren't where the farm community and its suppliers wish them to be. The rate of return for commodities, livestock, and poultry this year is low and could easily go lower. It's a bit better on the protein side than on the row crop side, but we're about to get into that. Joining us now, farm economist Ryan Loy, Dr. Ryan Loy of the UA's Division of Agriculture. Dr. Loy, thanks very much for coming in. It isn't a happy situation, particularly as we noted on the row crop side. How deep is the peril?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Stephen. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. A few things that we're looking at on the row crop side is we have a lot of carryover from the year before, and meaning we have high supplies. And with record years of production year over year, the last few years, we just continue to have that high supply. And we're looking for ways to use that supply such that we don't have just acres that have not been harvested yet that are going to end up in the same storage facilities that the last year's crop was at. And so that's a big issue that's putting a lot of downward pressure on prices. So you have that one side of it. The supply side economics of it is we have too much supply and it's pushing down that price. The other side of it is that this is historically one of the highest production costs few years in a row that we've had in agriculture. And so these farmers are getting price squeeze from both sides on this, dealing with a low price when they go to the market, as well as paying highest input costs they have in probably the last decade. And so that's what we're dealing with on this side, and especially on the interest side of things. Money is not cheap right now, and farmers require capital to harvest and to plant. And so these are the things we're looking at right now.
Well, the reports from the government anyway on inflation are a little optimistic over the last 2 or 3 months, and the last one just Wednesday, I think. Inflation continues to slow down. Cool is the term they use. Is it cooling too late to have much impact?
This year, I would say yes, because much of the operating loans and the operating notes and ownership notes have been set in place before this optimism in the marketplace has come through now. I think we're going to start seeing a little bit more of the benefit. And I want to put benefit in quotes, because we're not going to get back to those pre-COVID levels of interest where we had 0% Fed funds rate. Over the next 5 years, we're only expecting to get, at the best case, to get down to 2% in the Fed funds. meaning we're still going to have high interest rate environment. For this year, it may be too late. Next year, I think we're going to start seeing those kind of reprieves come through in the interest side of things.
So I think I hear you saying that consumers, at least over the next several years, had best brace themselves. I mean, they're not, the prices may get some break, but not a big break.
That's right. And one thing to think about is, when we talk about inflation coming down, when we talk about cooling and a soft landing, the prices that are here to stay. It's just how much are they going to change year over year? And I think that that's something we really need to consider going into the year. I think a lot of places are expecting a lower Christmas purchasing season because of those things. And so I think what we're going to see here is that these high prices are at least going to stick around and be sticky for a while. And it's just a question of how much are they going to change year over year and month over month into the future.
Well, with the Christmas retail season coming up and the harvest about to begin for so much of the row crop, is it even possible would it be responsible to speculate on the potential loss of farm income in this cycle?
Absolutely. I think speculation is about the best we can do, considering what we usually see in a marketing year is that right around harvest, the spot price for crops is going to be the lowest, right? Highest supply in the marketplace at that time. But as we move away from harvest, that supply dwindles, and so the price raises up right in about that February, March, right around up until about June. And so what we're going to see here is, I think that the verdict is still out on how much that upside price potential is going to show itself into this marketing year, especially considering I know anecdotally that there is so much carryover from last year in storage that some farmers are going to be forced to have to take that spot price. And when you're looking at a $4 corn for December delivery, based on some of the stuff we did on our budgets, the break even, and this is just break even, not even making a profit. Break even on corn is $6 to $6.50. And so you think about that disparity, and that's really going to be the issue.
Well, that's more than $2 underwater there on a bushel.
Yes, sir.
Well, these supply being out of sync, too much row crop, whether it's corn, wheat, soybeans, cotton even, and too little animal protein, and certainly beef anyway. A miscalculation on the part of the ag community here in terms of planning for the season?
I'd hate to point the finger one way or the other. I think it's kind of a perfect storm of a lot of events that have happened in the last few years. There is some overcorrection, right? And so there's a saying, as us economists have, that the cure to high prices is high supply, right? Or and then the cure to low prices, right, is high prices. Because if they see that low price, that we have a high supply, if folks are going to plant a lot during that high price period, they're going to drive that price low. So what we saw during Russian-Ukraine's early stages of that war, crop prices skyrocketed. But at the same time, input costs did too. But what we saw is that a lot of people adjusted that to catch that high price, but by doing so, the price went down. You have that. And then you also have Brazil, who can come onto the marketplace much earlier. And it is my opinion that I believe that we underestimated how quickly Brazil can switch their acreage from pasture to cropland. And they can get to the market earlier, and they're more attractive on the marketplace, especially to China, when they have a cheaper corn crop than we do, and soybeans, especially with our high interest rates that make our dollar more expensive on the marketplace.
Well, you mentioned China, Brazil, the war in the Ukraine. You didn't mention Cuba, but I just did. It seems that with every passing year, foreign policy and foreign affairs have a greater impact on ag in the United States, but particularly Arkansas, simply because it's so important to Arkansas.
That's right. It is. It's, especially when our major row crops are corn, soybeans, and rice, we are definitely going to be impacted by these foreign markets. And I really think that it's really just a perfect storm right now. And I wish there was a silver bullet for marketing or grain storage that we can point to and say, hey, this is how you can mitigate your risk. But the best way to mitigate your risk is the combination of a lot of these marketing tools, these risk management tools such as crop insurance. But still, even with all of that, you're not going to be getting the price that you expected when you had planted that crop. And that is a big problem, especially when if you didn't book your fuel in the lowest price environment, that's already eating into your margin. And so I always think about this on a break-even basis, and all of these aspects just put upward pressure on your break-even price, meaning every time that something like this happens, your break-even price is going to follow and have to get higher and higher.
And got to end
that's
it there.
not even.
Got to end it there,
Go
Dr. Loy. Thanks very much, because we're simply
Yes.
out of time. We thank you for yours, and please come back soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Barnes.
And that does it for us for this week. As always, we thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and Little Rock Public Radio.